Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Second or third week in a row? It's one of those, but we're on a good tear here, as they say, with consecutive episodes released. We haven't done that in a while. But let's just jump probably into, I don't know if you would agree with this, maybe the most significant news of the last couple of days, at least, is Matchroom Boxing and the Saudis, the Public Investment Fund, is that what they call it over there in Saudi Arabia? Turkey al-Sheikh announcing, I guess how would you categorize it? And a further partnership, financial partnership. I think we were talking about just before we came on air that the Saudis did purchase some percentage in Matchroom, earlier. I'm not sure if it was this year or last year, but they had some type of percentage ownership in the company. And now recently in the past few days, there were some recent developments. I think you had mentioned, didn't you mention that from the Matchroom docuseries that was released on Netflix on the UK, primarily on the UK Netflix, didn't they touch on something like this in regards to the Saudis and Matchroom furthering their partnership?
Yeah, on the documentary, Eddie speaks with Turkey al-Sheikh, and they discuss, buying a percentage of Matchroom, and then they speak to his father, and his father's like, we would be interested in selling you a small percentage, but we want to be able to, continue being kind of like a family-run business essentially. And then Eddie did talk on another podcast I was listening to recently about, if they do eventually sell the entire brand to PIF, that kind of like Dana White, he believes that he would have to stay for another, 5 to 10 years to be like the figurehead of the brand. So, yeah, interesting times, if they do eventually sell, if this Riyadh season keeps going from strength to strength and they go, what's the point in us, sponsoring Matchroom and stuff like that? We may as well just buy the whole thing because, as we're going to touch on now, you've got snooker, darts, boxing, all under one roof. And
darts especially, not over here in the United States, but you've told me, and I've obviously seen clips online, that darts is extremely popular, or it's getting extremely popular in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is, I would say, extremely popular. Like over the last probably 10 years, it went from strength to strength. You see people like Luke Littler. Maybe I see him more because I follow more British sports than maybe the normal American. So, yeah, he's everywhere on different shows. And then even, Barry Hearn and Eddie Hearn have said, like on that documentary, that that's actually the most profitable one that they have. I think it is 2 or 3 times more profitable than boxing.
Now, does that go back to because it's a brand new, I wouldn't say brand new, but it's an emerging sport that, the players, the athletes within that sport aren't significant names yet, so maybe they're not garnering the publicity and attention that requires high paydays like in boxing? Like how, obviously in boxing there was these superstars of fighters over the last few decades, and they're the ones who kind of elevated, especially starting with Floyd Mayweather and Pacquiao, but even before Tyson and all those guys, they were making a lot of money. But De La Hoya, Mayweather, Pacquiao, they really shot it up to a new level and really elevated pay for the next generation of fighters. Do you think it's because of that? Because there's not really one star right now? I mean, I can see it's popular, but do you think it's because it's not that in terms of like one individual star, like a Conor McGregor or something like that?
I would say it's probably cheaper to run in terms of like production, putting on an event. I bet the costs are probably a lot less, which gives you a bigger margin. And also, they essentially are the sport, kind of like UFC for darts and snooker. They're pretty much the only real brand, so they can kind of do what they want, kind of like them, and they are the monopoly. So it's probably easier in that sense.
And then we touched on they still want to run it like as a family business. The Hearns do, and I think you mentioned Dana White, kind of staying on with the UFC when they were sold to Endeavor. I mean, I think that's smart, right? Because when you think of Matchroom, especially Matchroom Boxing, or just Matchroom as a whole, I mean, especially over here in the United States, at least from my perspective, you think of Eddie Hearn. And I think we've mentioned this multiple times in the past on past episodes that Eddie Hearn is arguably, and I say arguably, kind of just to throw the term in there, but Eddie Hearn is arguably the best talker in terms of promoting you as a fighter. If you're like promoted by him, he's going to do interviews, and when he's up there talking, like you feel his salesmanship, that he's selling the fight and he's selling you as a fighter. So having him at the helm of Matchroom, as in Dana White being at the helm of UFC, I think really builds upon that image and furthers that image for, even though it's not a Saudi company from what we know totally yet, I think having Eddie Hearn in that position, even if it does go to another financial control, which in this case could be the Saudis in the future, keeping Eddie Hearn there as a Dana White is a good idea, isn't it?
100%. Because if you remember, one of the first fights that he had with Canelo, after the fight, Canelo was in the locker room with his coaches watching his entrance on his cell phone. That's how blown away he was with the promotion and the package and stuff that Eddie Hearn does, because no one had done that for him before. Because he had, was it J Balvin walk him out or something like that?
Like there's a Florida fight against
Billy Joe Saunders.
Yeah, they fought in Miami. Smith. No, it was it was just kind of like a
that like the guy Yildirim,
Avni Yildirim. That's right,
Avni Yildirim. Yeah, so that's one of the things. You look at Canelo, one of the biggest stars in the sport, comes to fight for Eddie, and obviously I'm sure Eddie would probably like, I need to show this guy like we mean business, and maybe went over the top to impress him, but it worked. And then you got to think that he's probably one of the most recognizable people in boxing, and he's not a boxer, like Dana White.
Right.
Like similar to Dana White, like you say to people who are MMA fans, they probably all know who Dana White is, and he's not even a fighter.
Right.
So yeah, 100%. Like if they do eventually sell, I think it would be like a UFC model where, hey, like we're going to buy it, but we need you for 5 years, 10 years, to carry on down this platform, because he doesn't necessarily have the best stable, but he definitely has the best promotion. Like he seems to know, like, okay, this guy is, a good boxer, but he's also going to sell tickets. Whereas like Frank Warren seems to be different. Like we think we saw that during the 5v5 when Frank Warren whitewashed him, won all 5 fights.
Right.
But Eddie's a better salesman, or he's better at spotting someone who's going to be popular on social media and is going to sell tickets.
Right.
He's all about the big bucks.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And then dropping this news now, I guess, still kind of capitalizes on the news from earlier last month in terms of Paramount and the UFC reaching a broadcast streaming deal with CBS, Paramount. And then also, I mean, TKO as a whole, I think also reached a deal with ESPN and the WWE, which is under their banner, the Endeavor banner, TKO. But I think from a business perspective, and obviously there's outside circumstances that affect people's perceptions or people's view of Saudi Arabia and all that. But from a business perspective, and we're just talking straight business here. I mean, Matchroom and Eddie Hearn have now furthered their partnership with Saudi Arabia. Golden Boy and Oscar De La Hoya, they still have some type of partnership with the Saudis. It's not as deep as Matchroom's is at this point, but it's there. Top Rank has Top Rank been maybe because of Fury, or has Top Rank been involved in any Saudi related events?
I think only fighters. I don't believe they've had like a Riyadh season sponsored card like Matchroom have and Golden Boy. They
haven't, right?
No, I think all you've same as like Boxer and a few others. I think they've just had sponsorship.
Right. So Top Rank essentially hasn't really taken the leap yet, but boxing has been experiencing financial difficulties the last several years. As you could see, just based off many broadcasters, and I'm speaking specifically in the U.S., many broadcasters exiting the boxing business, with as recently as Showtime did, even though Paramount kind of re-entered the boxing business by announcing a deal with TKO's Zuffa Boxing. So that's interesting, but I think it just goes to show that they trust the confidence of Ari Emanuel and Endeavor over there, and Dana White and that whole crew. But I think that the Saudis and Turkey Al Sheikh and that whole country over there, I mean, their goal, right, when they first started kind of seeping into the sport was to kind of, like, I think people knew, you could see the writing on the wall, right, that, okay, this country is obviously wealthy. They have the money to spend. And their goal is going to be to try to take control or get enough influence in the sport of boxing, especially with promoters and all that, to be able to run the sport. And that's in addition to other sports and other entertainment events that have been happening in that country as a part of Riyadh season and all that. I mean, are we essentially there now? Especially with this recent announcement with Matchroom, and Matchroom is arguably the biggest. I mean, you tell me if you disagree with this. Matchroom is arguably the biggest global boxing promoter at the moment. I mean, Top Rank is huge, but I think Matchroom does, at least in the last decade, I think Matchroom has done many fights internationally more than any other promoter, big promoter. And now the Saudis, I think, have reached that point where the influence is significant in the sport of boxing. Am I right?
No, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think Matchroom is, by far, I would say the biggest, because Top Rank pretty much does all of their shows either in Japan or America. Matchroom has shows in Italy, Australia, the UK, obviously over here. It's kind of slowed down a little bit because it seems to be a lot of the shows are going to Riyadh, so less and less are in Australia, Italy, places like that, like they used to. And it's just funny because are they still going to want to purchase Matchroom now that they're kind of jumping into bed with the Zuffa Boxing thing?
Well, that's the tie-in, right? I mean, don't you think that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom realized, like, okay, the Saudis have extreme influence with Zuffa and Dana, so if we kind of further our partnership with them, maybe we could get a piece of that TKO, Zuffa, Dana White business. Not like they can buy into it, but they can be associated with it and maybe use their fighters to be on their cards and vice versa. And, I mean, that makes sense to me, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, to trying to see which path they're going to go down now, because, I think some people were wondering, like, okay, are they just kind of testing the waters? Top Rank is probably looking at like being the cheapest they've been for a while in terms of purchasing it, because it doesn't have a TV rights deal that we know of. Obviously, there's the rumor that we read online of, going to Stars, which we'd read earlier, before on Twitter, but it hasn't been announced. So if you're looking at purchasing it, now would probably be a good time. If you buy Matchroom, you're getting multiple sports all in one banner. PBC isn't looking too good. They do a couple of shows a year. Okay, those shows are huge, but they're only doing 4 or 5 a year. Right. They're struggling with a TV deal. Their TV deal is pay-per-view only on Amazon. So, now could be a good time for him if he wants to, buy all of them and stick them all under one banner. So it's interesting what he's going to do.
You think we are heading that way? I mean, I think that Dana White is, that he's essentially done that with the UFC, right? Because like Bellator and, all those guys are pretty much gone. Or Bellator is gone. I don't think they.
Yeah, they're gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
In 10 years, are we just going to see Zuffa Boxing as the primary big leagues, as they say, in the world in comparison to UFC? Especially now with the Saudis involved and kind of, because I think Ari Emanuel, the head of Endeavor, who owns TKO, WWE, Zuffa, UFC, I think Dana White has said that in interviews that these Zuffa Boxing things, like they're like I think the Saudis are funding a good part of it.
Yeah,
like they're involved significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a chance that the Saudis know that, okay, we're going to lose money initially or maybe for a while, but we can afford to lose money. And then Endeavor, TKO, and that whole group over there is like, hey, good for us, because we'll just, we'll get our cut and, our risk investment will be fine. I mean, I'm sure that's how they're looking at it.
The only thing I think stops them buying them all is, how much money are we talking? I know they're stupidly rich, but to invest all of that money, purchase PBC, purchase Matchroom, purchase Top Rank, purchase Queensberry, they're the main ones, right, that you would probably buy. If you rewind, 30, 40 years ago, that's what Vince McMahon did.
Yeah. That's exactly what he did. If people are familiar with the WWE and professional wrestling, Vince McMahon, who created it, who was the owner up until it was sold to Endeavor and Ari Emanuel, had worked for his dad, Vince McMahon Sr., who had created at the time the WWF. And then I think Vince McMahon Jr. has said in interviews that his father wanted to sell it, so he offered to buy the stake from his dad. He's like, hey, let me buy it from you. I'll buy it from you. And he purchased it. But at that time, there was essentially how we see boxing now, or for the last several decades, there's multiple promoters everywhere. At that time in the professional wrestling world, there was multiple promoters all over the world, especially in the United States. There was like the Southwest, the East Coast, the West Coast, the North, different pockets of the United States had promoters. And Vince McMahon has said that his dad had always worked alongside these promoters in the United States, and they all kind of worked together. They would share essentially their performers. And Vince McMahon, when he bought it from his dad, he put all those guys out of business. And he says, I competed with them. But what he essentially did is he found ways to kind of reduce their business, those promoters' businesses, so they can either sell to him or he could get those performers to come work for him. And eventually he just monopolized it, and he turned it into this multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that it is today. I mean, that's exactly probably what Zuffa Boxing and the Saudis pretty much want to do, in my opinion. What do you think?
That's what I'm wondering. It's just, if it was many years ago and maybe things were a little bit cheaper, maybe easier to do, because that's pretty much what Dana White did with UFC. Once that got popular, they just bought Pride, bought all the others, put people like Bellator like pretty much out of business. PFL's not doing too great. So you do have to wonder, is that what they're looking at? And it's because I wonder, they sponsor so many different companies, Top Rank, Queensberry, the auto-sponsored Boxer, and guys like that. So what happens if one day they just decide to pull the sponsorship?
Right.
They've had it for so many years, and then they're just like, oh, we're not going to renew it. But, I'm sure they're probably playing over the odds. And then, Boxer's like, well, where am I going to get this extra, $1 million per show or whatever it is they're paying them?
No, exactly. But I mean, like, isn't the world, especially in business, isn't it essentially like that? Where people with the money, whether you call them sponsors or whatever you call them, like they have power, right? Because they have money. So if they're sponsoring like a TV program or a product or what have you, if that sponsor who's giving you millions of dollars a year so you can advertise their service or their product within your program, if they see something they don't agree with and they go to the big bosses of that entity and say, hey, we're not for this, either you change this or we pull our sponsorship, which means the money goes away. I mean, that happens. That's real. Like that's real. That happens a lot. I think it's happening. If we stick with sports, it's happened in baseball. I think it's happened in the NFL, the National Football League. Has it happened from, you're a big football fan. When I say football, I mean soccer. Has that happened in football, soccer, from you can remember?
Not that I can remember. The only one I can remember recently is where it was kind of the other way round, weirdly, was where there was a sponsorship Dana White was talking about, who I think went kind of like woke or liberal. And then Dana White was just pretty much like, hey, when the contract's done, we don't want to be associated with you anymore.
That's right. He did say that.
Yeah, and it was some type of brand, and he just sort of like, but they're big enough now, like, which is unusual, right, for a company to be big enough that where they can turn sponsorships away. But I remember him saying it was a big brand. He didn't name names, but
that's right. Yeah, that did happen. I mean, even in just the last 5 years during the pandemic, there was a lot of things happening like that. But I mean, that's what's going to happen, right? That's what's going to happen. And I mean, and especially in boxing, you see, there's always been brands, products, and services that have been, I mean, every time you watch a fight, or it's a big pay-per-view fight, or just like a, Wednesday night fights or Friday night fights on ESPN or HBO Boxing After Dark or whatever broadcast you're watching, you always see advertisements on the ring mat. Corona, Modelo, Budweiser, Bud Light, whatever you can think of, it's probably been on that mat. And the promoters and a lot of, the people at top of the business for those events are getting a good cut of that sponsorship. I mean, if those sponsorships pull out, I mean, you don't think the promoters are going to be like, hey, what's going on? Like, how can we make this work for you to stay? Because it's money that helps their business. I mean, that's just the nature of the game, right? And I think all these promoters and, for example, Matchroom, with their announcements of furthering their partnership with Saudi Arabia, I think they see like, hey, the Saudis have money. And if they're looking to spend it, and if we reject them, they're just going to go somewhere else and go to someone else in the sport that's going to say yes. And they're going to take that money. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it's happening. Like, we're in that now. Like, it's happening. Like, the sport of boxing is going in that direction, and the Saudis are gaining significant influence. But they have, if you want to look at a silver lining, there has been a lot of fights made. I mean, whoever thought we would see Canelo and Crawford?
Bivol Beterbiev twice.
Bivol Beterbiev, I mean, that's just the nature of the game, right? I mean, that's where we're at. And I think the only thing we could hope for, I guess, in a sense, is to say, okay, well, us as boxing fans, let's just hope we get the content that we want. Like, we've had this podcast since 2018, so we've always talked about, like, oh, we want to see this fight. This fight's not happening. How come this fight isn't happening? Or it takes years to get here. I mean, as long, if we see these fights, at least we're getting some type of deliverable on the product. I mean,
do you think that because a lot of these fights are going over to Saudi and some of these cards are essentially having 5 or 6 fights which could be main events in somewhere like Los Angeles or wherever, we're getting less and less cards? Because just when's the last time we had a local boxing event in California?
Well, you tell me if you agree with this, because this is what I think, and I think I'm right, just based on there really hasn't been any cards from Riyadh season or the Saudis in California, the LA area since the Crawford Madrimov, right?
Yeah, that's the only one we've had.
Ever since then, we haven't had any other cards. And I think if you remember, there's interviews or clips of Turki Al-Sheikh kind of describing his experience in LA in regards to that card. And it wasn't a good experience. Like, he wasn't like appreciative of, maybe the service he got at a hotel or something. Like, he wasn't appreciative. He just wasn't, so I think he just had he's the guy with the money. He's the guy with the deep pockets. So I think because of his unfortunate experience, even though, it was a fun fight, it was a very competitive fight, but because of Turki Al-Sheikh's unfortunate experience, he doesn't want to come back to LA or even New York. I mean, they tried that Times Square event and they got a lot of bad press for that. It didn't pan out how they wanted. So I think they will come back, but I think that the time for these big fights, I think I don't want to say it's over, but it's dwindling.
But I mean, just in general, because he's got 5 or 6 fights on a card, which could be a main event anywhere else, that means we're getting less shows because we've got less headline acts.
Oh.
So, like, when was the last time? We have a Matchroom show scheduled for December.
Right.
But apart from that, when they used to come once or twice a year. Or Top Rank used to come all the time and go to San Diego, go to Pachanga, places like that. We seem to be getting less and less shows. Like, look at Golden Boy, how many they used to do shows every month or every 2 months at a local casino or the Belasco. I couldn't tell you the last time. They did one in Fantasy Springs recently, but nowhere near the consistent basis that we used to get.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, Golden Boy is obviously an LA-based company. Obviously, there was rumors that De La Hoya, him moving to Vegas or relocating to Vegas, but their offices are still in the LA area. And they've been putting on fights, but you also got to look at it like you just mentioned. A lot of their fights, they've had this multi-year partnership with Fantasy Springs Casino, which is what? From downtown LA, where the Golden Boy headquarters office is at. Fantasy Springs Casino is in Indio, California, which is about
probably
120 miles east from downtown LA. Like, it's not, you can't just get there like in an hour. It's going to take a minute. And I mean, from a business perspective, going back to the business perspective of the sport, just like anything, Fantasy Springs Casino is a tribal casino. So they don't get taxed. So I'm sure that Golden Boy, just like a lot of, and not just boxing promoters, but a lot of artists who perform at these casinos, they get to keep more money because they don't get taxed on it because it's tribal land. So I'm sure there's people who say, why are they going all the way out there? Like, I'm in LA. I want to watch some fights here at the StubHub Center or, the USC Galen Center or Staples Center or these local venues or Long Beach or what have you. But they go 120 miles east of downtown Los Angeles because it's worth it for them to put on these smaller shows at this casino. I mean, right?
It's probably closer to Phoenix.
You think so? You think it's really closer to
Phoenix? A similar distance to Phoenix than it is to Los Angeles.
It might be like a halfway point, don't you think?
Yeah.
If you go from downtown Los Angeles to where Fantasy Springs Casino is in Indio, California, and for people who aren't aware of the geography of what we're talking about, the popular Coachella Music Festival is in that area, Indio. It's in that desert area. Like that's where it happens. And a lot of people travel to, especially from LA, they travel east into Coachella, but they stay there like for multiple days. But yeah, I think going back to what you said, it's probably a halfway point between LA and Phoenix, Arizona. So, I mean, it's significant. It's significant. I mean, you could obviously drive there, drive back. I think we've done that a few times where we've driven there, driven back and all that. So, I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, I think going back to your original point, them putting on all these fights, especially on undercards, overseas, that could be main events on their own, does kind of decrease the possibilities of us getting events over here.
Because it's just that who's going to sell the tickets, who's going to be the headline act. So it seems like they just don't put on shows because, man, me and you used to go regular to like all these shows, and it'd be interesting at the end of the year to go on to BoxRec and just go through each promoter and just count, how many shows they've done this year, and then compare it to the last 2, 3, 4 years, and just see how many less we've had.
Right. And then, you talked about Top Rank earlier. Top Rank really hasn't announced, or I think they might have announced the Stars partnership, which is the Stars channel, I think. I don't know if there's actually an official announcement, but Top Rank technically doesn't have a significant broadcast deal right now when their ESPN1 just ended. So, I mean, I'll never forget once that there was they interviewed De La Hoya about when he lost Canelo, and because Canelo was such a significant part of his business, of Golden Boy's business. Remember they asked him hey, what happens if the company starts experiencing financial troubles or something, something in relation to that. And he kind of said, I don't know if he said it jokingly or not, but I felt like he said it seriously, where he said, it'll be fine. He's like, he said something along the lines of, I'll just transfer money from my personal bank account over to the business and it's fine. And I'm sure that's happened for certain things, but it's just kind of like, man, I can't believe you said that. I can't believe that's how he responded. He could have been like, oh, it'll be fine. I've survived this long, which he has said that. But I remember him saying specifically, now I'll try to find the clip and send it to you, but I remember him saying specifically, I'll just transfer money from, my account over here and over here, and it's fine. I'm like, man, I'm sure that happens in a lot of businesses, but the fact that somebody like him is saying that, it's like, oh, it is what it is. Man. Right. I don't know. You think 10 years? 10 years and Zuffa Boxing becomes the one dominant brand in the sport? Or you don't think we get there? Because it's not the question that it's not the if they're trying that, it's they are trying that. It's not, oh, are they trying that? It's no, they are.
I could see them maybe being the dominant force and owning Zuffa Boxing and Matchroom, and having Zuffa as like their feeder into the big fights, in your Canelos and your big names all fight under Matchroom, and they buy Matchroom because of the fact it's a multi-sport platform. So they're making money on TV deals for darts and snooker and boxing. And then maybe the other ones are just there. I just don't know if he's going to buy them all. Maybe he'll just buy Matchroom, have Zuffa Boxing and then pay Dana to run that. And they'll just run the rest of them out of town. They won't need to buy them because they're just going to run them out of town.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Yeah, you just make it so difficult for them to sustain themselves.
They have so much money that they can just offer contracts that other people can't compete with because they don't really have to run at a profit because they have endless bags of money.
I mean, that's the nature of business, right? Especially in the United States, is that these products, when these companies or products start making significant flows of cash and money or stocks or whatever, then they go and see, like, for example, so what's something that everybody can relate to is social media. I think Facebook purchased Instagram like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Instagram and Facebook were separate companies, and Facebook came in I'm not sure who owned Instagram at the time, and said, hey, we want to buy your entire business. Here's our offer. Let's make a deal. And they made a deal. You remember MySpace, which was like the original social networking app like 20 years ago? Same thing. They were sold. Snapchat, I think, was sold. Somebody owns that, or I believe so. But I mean, that's essentially what happens, right? Like your product becomes, or your service becomes so popular and so significant that you can, just like we talked about Vince McMahon earlier, he buys out his competition, or he makes it difficult for them to sustain themselves, and then he came in and purchased them or took their performers. So I mean, that's what it is. And I think the Saudis and Zuffa, I think, and now Matchroom, they're trying to like see, like, I think they kind of see the writing on the wall, like, hey, they're going to try to do this, so we might as well try to be a part of it if we want to sustain ourselves. Let's associate ourselves with them.
I mean, I can't remember whether we touched on it or not, but they kind of or are controlling the media side of it by, banning boxing scene, owning the ring.
The ring, yeah.
Owning the ring. And
right.
It sounds like, if you write something that they don't like, then you just, your credentials are pulled.
Well, I mean, hasn't that happened for a long time with any promoter? I mean, yeah. PBC has blacklisted us for how many years now?
Yeah, and I don't know whether you can touch on. I won't say the name unless you want to. But the person who was at the Golden Boy event who asked a difficult question, and then was then.
Oh yeah. We don't need to say it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that. That's the thing. It's just kind of like, it's, unless you're significant enough where your business or your profile is too hard to ignore, like, you can ask those questions, but you have to be prepared for the consequences. Like, I mean, that's true. That's just like that. Like, if you're significant enough, you have a significant profile. Because, especially if there's people out there who try to support themselves in the business of boxing, which we know some people, like, we don't want them to affect their livelihood, but, sometimes they have to ask the difficult questions, but it is unfortunate that, promoters won't let media credentials, or they won't give you credentials or something like that. I mean, that's true. That's unfortunate. But that's just what happens. Like, that's the game that you have to play within. You know, and we've been involved in the boxing media side for, maybe a decade now, maybe a little longer, give or take.
Yeah, luckily we have careers. This isn't our career, so like.
No, right, and I think there's a lot of people that we know that do have, outside employment in addition to their boxing media space positions. But there's some people who, which is great. I mean, they're trying to sustain themselves within the sport, and you want them to be able to sustain themselves within the sport, because that means that the sport is healthy, like you're able to make money off of it. But going back to what we talked about earlier, I mean, TV broadcasters just kind of exiting the boxing business over the last several years. I mean, it doesn't help. And then a lot of boxing writers and boxing reporters and boxing journalists, have been let go from outlets, or, have had to start their own. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, you could sustain yourself as a boxing reporter. They were making a good living, but that's not really the case anymore. But I mean, hopefully in the future it changes. I mean, you can sustain yourself by going into a career like that, but that's just the nature of the game right now. And with Zuffa and TKO kind of coming in, I mean, I don't know. Look at the UFC. How many MMA reporters or MMA writers are prominent right now? Right.
I mean, you got like what? Ariel Helwani's obviously the biggest, you would say, right?
And he's been doing this for like 15 years.
And like you touched on, he was a big name, and he was blacklisted from the UFC.
I mean, yeah, that's just the nature of the game, right? I mean, it's unfortunate, but luckily he has a platform where he's able to sustain himself, and he has a high profile. So, he has a partnership with DAZN, or DAZN solicits his services and all that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of what ifs and possible pathways that could happen. And obviously this is just here on the podcast, we're just discussing and speculating, and, just based on our experience in the sport over the last several years. But this is we're just speculating, right? We don't know.
Right. Yeah. For those questions, you think you just don't ask them, or you phrase them in such a way it's kind of hidden?
I think there's ways to ask certain questions. I mean, you do have to be strategic. You do. You have to be strategic in asking certain questions. If you're trying to get a certain answer or information on a certain topic, you do have to be strategic, especially when you're going to ask it to somebody like a Dana White or somebody like that, who is not afraid to say something back. So yeah, I mean, I think there is ways, but even if you find a certain strategic way to ask a question, you're still always going to take a risk. Like, that's why I don't know if you watch, I'm sure you do, but for example, just like the more prominent sports in the United States, baseball, basketball, American football, a lot of the reporters after each of these games, whether it's an NBA game, an NFL game, MLB game, when they're in the press conferences, the post-game press conferences with the players or the managers or the coaches, a lot of the questions they're insightful questions, but they're very, like, I don't want to say easy, but they're very, like, a lot of them are like, hey, Coach Shepard, like, how difficult was it for you to leave, for example, like the the Major League Baseball playoffs are happening right now. So they'll ask like, "Hey, Coach Shep, like, how difficult was it for you to leave your reliever in the seventh inning, knowing that in the prior games he was in, he wasn't doing so well?" You know, like it's questions like that. Like, you know, you're going to get insightful answers, and you know, I mean, they're questions, but like I've noticed that a lot of reporters in major sports won't really cross that line if it's a significant thing. Because I mean, you know, people are watching these sports, you know, whether it's like here in the LA area, the Dodgers are in the playoffs right now, and the Yankees are in the New York area and all that, Phillies, Seattle. But I mean, we've been around, you know, the professional boxing for a while on the media side, right? And we've seen people ask questions. We've asked questions. I mean, we've had people within promoters' teams and even fighters' management teams tell us on the side, like, who are these people? Who is that guy? Who is this person? Or they didn't like certain questions. Like, people have told us that, you know? And it's kind of like, and some people realize like, hey, I want to sustain my access. So I'm going to ask insightful questions, but I don't want to cross any line in terms of upsetting any of these people, because they could take my access away, which affects my platform. I mean, that's how they look at it, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then there's a time and a place, and then, you know, maybe building a rapport with a person in boxing so they recognize your face, and then they see a familiar face, and then you ask a difficult question, but you already have some type of rapport or friendship, whatever it is, with them. They're probably more likely to ask than just, I've never seen this guy before, and you're asking a really difficult personal question that he doesn't really want to answer.
No, right. I mean, because I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen this before too, but I've seen like reporters and writers build enough rapport with significant personalities in boxing, whether it's promoters or fighters or managers or what have you, where, you know, instead of asking them in front of the entire media or in front of like at a press conference, they'll ask them in a smaller group or on the side, like in a kind of private setting. They'll ask them like, hey, you know, like, have you thought about this? So like, you know, what's your take on this? Like, to try to like, I don't want to say save them the embarrassment of publicly asking them, but I think that's how they strategically kind of gain their trust. Like, hey, look, like, I'm asking you this in private or on the side over here, because, you know, not in front of the cameras. And like, I've been standing right there and I've heard questions like that. There's no cameras or anything. And I mean, I've seen it. I'm just like, okay, I see what they're doing. Like, they're trying to, just, you know, I get it. You got to be strategic sometimes, you know, and I've seen when those questions, when uncomfortable questions get asked like that, like in a more private setting, I've seen the person who's answering that question, sometimes they get upset, but a majority of the time, from the instances that pop into my head right now, I've seen those people answer kind of candidly. Be like, oh, you know, I get it. You know, I know people are wondering, and they kind of give some background on the answer. But it's also like, if you ask that question in front of 15, 20 media members with a bunch of cameras around and a bunch of smartphones around, it's going to go out. I mean, that's the expectation and the risk that you have to realize that's going to happen, you know? And if it comes back and they say, hey, you know, they took away my access. I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate that happens. It does. It's unfortunate because it affects the ability of people to ask those hard-hitting questions in terms of the sport or certain things. But, you know, It's not like it's not like we haven't seen it before. We've seen it before. I mean, it's the media, right? Boxing media. We've seen people come and go.
So many.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
Damn, we were on this topic for over 45 minutes. When's the last time we've talked about a topic for this long? I don't remember.
Because people always say, the American phrase of like, you only ask like softball questions and stuff like that when you watch like an Ariel Hawani interview or something like that. And, that's why, because
he asked some good questions though. I've seen.
Yeah, he does.
Different personalities and people. He'll ask some good questions, but he also has a significant platform in relation to combat sports. So I think he can afford to do that.
But even I think his views are dwindling when you look at YouTube and you look at like his IFL TV, Fight Hub, etc. If you rewind 4 or 5 years ago, I think those numbers seem to be down in terms of just watching like the normal interviews.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, so it's just like we keep going back to the prior points. You were saying that we're not getting a lot of events in the LA area and the Southern California area anymore, and before, like, we were the hotbed of boxing, so you could be in the LA area and go to all these events every weekend and go get content, go get these interviews with these fighters, go get the interviews with the managers or fighters who aren't even fighting on the card, but they're attending the fights. You can talk to them, and you get content.
Mm.
And yeah, you can obviously interview people via Zoom or some online video platform, but being able to interview somebody in person, in front of them, is a lot different. It's more engaging in terms of the questions you're going to ask and the information you're going to get out of them. So, I mean, yeah. Matchroom, furthering their partnership with Saudi Arabia and all that. I mean, it's a strategy, right? They're trying to stay in the good graces and eventually get a partnership with Zuffa Boxing and all that, and that's just the nature of the game. I mean, that's what the writing on the wall is, at least to me.
Yeah, I think they get purchased by PIF Riyadh Season in, I don't know, the next 5 to 10 years. I think they'll do a sponsorship now, and the article I was reading is, give me 1 second, Saudi-based events coming soon are going to be Saudi Arabia Darts Masters in January. In November 2025, Riyadh Season Snooker, various Matchroom boxing events such as November 15th, Unfinished Business, which is Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. And then also they're going to have the first ever Six Kings Slam of Tennis.
Oh, wow.
Boxing's Ring 5, Night of the Samurai, and professional wrestling's WWE Royal Rumble in 2026.
Wow.
And they've also just announced a multi-year commercial partnership with the Spanish soccer La Liga.
Oh, wow. I'm telling you. They have Live Golf over there too, right?
Yeah, Formula One. They have a deal with, obviously, the UFC to hold events.
Isn't Tom Brady the American football player who retired? Isn't he doing something over there too?
Flag football.
Yeah, there you go. You know how much money they probably had to pay him to do something like that? it's like,
he's got everything to lose and nothing to gain. So,
right.
Legend. So, just imagine paying him to go and do a flag football tournament.
That's so crazy, man. That's so crazy. Let's touch on some stuff in the last couple minutes here of the show. The IBF recently ordered Raymond Murataya to defend against Andy Cruz in a lightweight title fight. I think Eddie Hearn talked about, winning the purse bid, but the IBF mandated a lightweight title defense for champion Raymond Murataya against unbeaten contender Andy Cruz, who is the Cuban Olympic gold medalist that's signed with Matchroom. You think this happens? Because you know how many times we've seen sanctioning bodies order a fight and it never happens? Does this happen?
Unless someone paid some step-aside money, but, Andy Cruz was an amateur for a long, long time, and, I think he probably wants to pick up a title as soon as he can. And I think that's a very, very winnable fight for Andy Cruz. I think he's all wrong for someone like...
You think it's a really very winnable fight? I think Cruz has obviously got a lot at stake, or he's got a lot of, confidence behind his resume, but I think this is a pretty good competitive fight. You think Cruz is a big favorite?
Yeah, I think stylistically-wise, I think he's too much of a mover. For Muay is good, strong, workmanlike, but I don't think he's the same sort of level as Andy Cruz. I think Andy Cruz probably beats him relatively easily, in my opinion. But hopefully we see. And you can go for Muay and I'll take Andy Cruz if the fight does come to fruition.
Does this land on the zone?
Well, yeah, everything's on the zone.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's a trick question.
Yeah.
It's a total trick question. And then also this weekend, the 11th of October, Jaron Boots Ennis goes up against, is it Usima Lima, Lima, in Philadelphia, which is Boots' hometown, on DAZN once again. Ennis is making his super welterweight debut, in a WBA eliminator, as he tries to go towards undisputed status, of course. We were talking about this just before we came on air. I think it's time for Ennis to finally find that one significant opponent, right?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat what I said to you. I don't know whether people don't want to fight Boots because he's that good, but he's kind of got that Crawford thing where we all know he's good or we all think he's good, but where are the names? He's gone through 147, he's now at 154. Where are the names, on the ledger that we wanted, Crawford to have? Because I think everyone thinks the same about Boots, really, really good, just needs a few names on there. With Matchroom, you think he'd be able to get them. Very rarely do they duck a fight or anything like that. Normally, Eddie seems to put, the money where his mouth is and tries to get them something. So, hopefully sooner rather than later, we don't want to have the same, Terence Crawford thing where he's getting close to retirement and we're all like, man, he's really, really good, but he's only won like one or two big fights. And, how good is he? So let's see. Maybe even those two. If he picks up a belt at 154, Crawford, Ennis.
You think? I don't think Crawford. I think Crawford's done. I think he's
like
essentially done. Huh?
Like done, like retirement?
Not retired. I purposely didn't use the word retired, but I think he's done in terms of taking these. I think an Ennis fight for him isn't worth it anymore because he's like, I think I've proven what I need to prove. Like, in his mind, he's the best fighter in the world. He went up 3 weight classes and defeated this generation's cash cow, who was supposed to be the bigger man. He beat Spence after PBC kind of boxed him out for so many years. He dominated Spence when that was a fight that everybody wanted to see. Like, these two are. I picked Spence. When you pick Crawford and I picked Spence, and I was totally wrong. Spence got dominated. I think Crawford's just at that point. He's like, I don't need to prove anything anymore. So I don't think he's going to fight Ennis. I don't think he will. I think Crawford is on that has that mentality now where he's like, let me do these big event fights. And I don't think Ennis for him is a big event fight.
Jake Paul?
Yes.
Since Jake kept calling out Canelo, he's beaten Canelo. He's kind of smaller naturally than Canelo, right? So maybe he goes,
yeah.
Hey, I was calling out Canelo for the longest time.
If Jake Paul's fighting Gervonta Tank Davis, the fact that people are like, at the beginning or in the past years, they were like, oh, Jake Paul's too big, or he's too big, or he's not going to do this or that. Even though the Davis fight is kind of like an exhibition, or it is an exhibition, it's not a sanctioned fight. People are still going to watch that fight. They're going to watch it. So you don't think if Jake Paul's like, hey, I want to fight you, Crawford, you don't think Crawford's going to be like, okay, bring out the checkbook. Oh, it's on Netflix again? Oh, yeah. I think Crawford's in that mindset. And I don't think he moves from it. So I think Ennis is just going to have to fight everybody else who's highly ranked at 154 and just take his sights off of Crawford. I think he should say, like, hey, if Crawford, if you want to come back and fight, I'm here. I'm ready. But I don't think he should put too much energy into calling out or waiting for a Terrence Crawford. I think he should just fight everybody like how Triple G did for all those years. Nobody really wanted to fight him, so he just started fighting all the other guys who were ranked and just stayed busy. Where eventually he just became so significant and raised his profile financially that people like Canelo and Danny Jacobs and all these guys just had to fight him. They're like, oh, I'm going to make a ton of money regardless, so I'm going to go for it. You think Crawford and Ennis end up fighting?
I just don't know if there's going to be enough money in it for Crawford. Even when he was at Top Rank, it always seemed to be that, Bob Arum kind of touched on it, didn't he? That he would pay him an awful lot of money at times to fight people he probably shouldn't have been earning that type of money for. So I think he's like a old school gladiator. Like he'll fight anyone if the money's right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if either of them are that popular that they would get that type of money that he got for Canelo or anywhere near.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he's... I don't know. Maybe like a Jake Paul. But...
yeah, he'd have to fight someone like that.
Yeah, but I don't think he's going to get near a Canelo payday anymore. And I don't think Canelo's going to get near a payday like the Crawford fight anymore either.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd have to.
I mean, he's still going to have significant paydays, but I don't think he's going to get that high of a payday anymore.
100 million or whatever he got or something.
I mean, yeah, Turkey Al-Sheikh, I think said it out loud that Canelo was making over $100 million. like he confirmed it, and he's the one in charge of the event. So,
same. Good for him.
One more fight actually happened this October 11th this weekend in Sheffield, your neck of the woods over there. Across the pond, as they say, on the zone. Dave Allen goes up against Arslanbek. Help me say that. Do you know how to say it?
Makhmudov. Yeah.
What do you think about that fight? You were talking about just before we came on air, Dave Allen, Eddie Hearn. What do you think?
I mean, it's literally like a real life story of Rocky. If he manages to be Makhmudov, he's going to end up getting like Deontay Wilder or Kubrat Pulev. That Dave Allen said in an interview today. So, he's such a likable guy because he just seems like a guy next door, kind of funny, doesn't take life too serious. And I think that's why a lot of people have really been drawn in by him. And it's good to see that the penny has finally dropped and he's decided I need to, which sounds stupid because he's a professional, but I need to train, I need to run, I need to eat right. It's like he was self-sabotaging himself because if he ever went into a fight fully fit and lost, he never had an excuse. Whereas when he goes into a fight like, I never ran, I didn't eat properly, and then he loses, he's always got that excuse to kind of like sit back on, which kind of sounds silly to say, but some people do that.
Right.
So it's interesting to see, he's with Jamie Moore and just looking at the pictures of him, he looks in like such good condition right now. He's in a good gym, good sparring with, Pat Brown, an up-and-coming, cruiserweight. So I actually think Dave Allen has a chance. I know everybody always says that, like, technique-wise, he's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He just didn't believe in himself. He was never fit enough. He would always coast through rounds so easily, but he didn't have the tank to actually put pressure on you. And, look what he's done in his career so far, and he's only been at 50% or maybe even less. So it's going to be interesting to see because Makhmudov is really like come forward fighter, pressure fighter, who's very good when he's on the attack. But what's he like, when he's missing, and then Dave Allen's coming over the top. And, Dave's smaller than him. Obviously Makhmudov's going to be a big target. And it's kind of very similar in terms of style, I think, to the Johnny Fisher fight. Because Johnny Fisher was similar in terms of very good at coming forward, putting pressure on you, very, very comfortable when it's like that. And Dave Allen's very slippery. Very rarely does he get hit full. He rides a lot of shots, takes a sting out of a lot of things. And then, boom, just out of nowhere, he'll come up with a body shot like he dropped Lucas Brown with. He comes with one over the top like he knocked Johnny Fisher out with. So, weirdly, I think he's going to do it. And we're going to have like a real-life Rocky v. Apollo Creed.
Rocky Apollo Creed, huh? It's coming, man. It's coming. But we appreciate you guys. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, hopefully we kind of gave you guys a solid hour, a little bit over an hour of the most recent news and notes in the sport of boxing. But before we sign off, Mike, one more time, let them know where they can find us and follow us.
At The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. And we do have several interviews coming up, so stay tuned over the next few weeks.
Yeah, they're coming. So we were supposed to have some this week, but we had to do some rescheduling, but they're still interested, so we're just kind of moving some dates around. So hopefully we get you guys some in the next couple weeks. So for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.